The breach happened at 4:47 hours. A reinforced steel door, designed to withstand explosives and small arms fire, was peeled open like a tin can by a shaped charge placed with surgical precision by an FBI hostage rescue team breacher. The blast echoed through the subterranean corridors beneath Miraflores Palace in Caracas, sending a shockwave that rattled the foundations of Venezuela's seat of power. What lay beyond that door would provide the final, irrefutable proof of what investigators had suspected for years. The government of Venezuela wasn't just complicit in narco trafficking. It was actively operating as the logistical backbone of one of the largest cocaine distribution networks in the Western Hemisphere. The discovery of 15 tons of pure cocaine hidden in a fortified bunker beneath the presidential palace represented the largest single drug seizure in Latin American history. But the drugs were only part of the story. What FBI and DEA agents found in those underground chambers would expose the full scope of the Maduro regime's transformation from a failed socialist government into a full-fledged narco state. The operation to secure Maduro's bunker complex began hours after Delta Force operators extracted the Venezuelan dictator and his wife, Cilia Flores, from the upper floors of Miraflores Palace. While those high-value targets were being transferred to a U.S. Navy vessel offshore, another phase of the mission was just beginning. This phase would involve not commandos, but investigators. Not rifles, but evidence collection kits. Not neutralizing targets, but building prosecutable cases that would stand up in federal court. The intelligence that led agents to the bunker had been developed over years of painstaking work. The Drug Enforcement Administration's Special Operations Division, working in conjunction with the CIA's Counter-Narcotics Center, had been tracking the Cartel de los Soles since its formation in the early 2000s. The cartel, named after the sun insignia worn by Venezuelan generals, was unlike traditional drug trafficking organizations. It wasn't a criminal group that had infiltrated the government. It was the government itself, operating as a criminal enterprise. DEA analysts working out of the agency's Miami Field Division had spent years following the money. Bank records obtained through subpoenas and international law enforcement cooperation showed billions of dollars flowing from Venezuelan government accounts into shell companies registered in Panama, the British Virgin Islands, and Cyprus. These shell companies then purchased luxury real estate in Miami, Madrid, and the Dominican Republic. They bought private jets, yachts, and exotic cars. They made investments in casinos, nightclubs, and shopping malls. But the evidence was largely circumstantial until a breakthrough came in late 2024. A mid-level Venezuelan army colonel named Alejandro Granados, facing drug trafficking charges in the Southern District of Florida, agreed to cooperate with prosecutors. Granados had been arrested in Colombia, attempting to broker a deal for 500 kilograms of cocaine destined for the United States. Rather than face a mandatory minimum sentence of 10 years, he decided to talk. What Granados told DEA special agents during dozens of debriefing sessions was extraordinary. He described in detail how cocaine produced in FARC-controlled territories in Colombia was transported into Venezuela with the assistance of Venezuelan military units. He explained how the National Guard, theoretically responsible for border security, actually provided armed escorts for drug convoys. He detailed how military aircraft were used to transport cocaine from clandestine airstrips in the Venezuelan interior to departure points on the Caribbean coast. And most significantly, Granados described a vast underground facility beneath Miraflores Palace where cocaine was stored before being shipped to international markets. He said the bunker was managed directly by senior officials in Maduro's government, including Diosdado Cabello, the regime's number 2, and Tariq el-Aissami, a former vice president with deep ties to Hezbollah and Iranian intelligence. Initially, some DEA supervisors were skeptical. The claim seemed almost too sensational. A cocaine storage facility directly beneath the presidential palace? It sounded like something out of a Netflix series, not real-world intelligence. But Granados provided details that could be verified. He described the bunker's layout, its security systems, its ventilation infrastructure. He provided names of military officers who had access. He even described specific shipments that had passed through the facility, details that aligned with DEA intelligence on cocaine seizures in other countries. The CIA began collecting corroborating evidence. Satellite imagery showed construction activity around Miraflores Palace in 2008 and 2009 during Hugo Chávez's presidency. That was consistent with underground excavation. Signals intelligence picked up coded radio transmissions that referenced the vault and the basement, terms that seemed to align with Granados's description. And most compellingly, the CIA had a source inside the Venezuelan military intelligence service who confirmed the bunker's existence. By early 2025, the intelligence picture was clear enough that the DEA began planning for the possibility of securing the bunker if an opportunity arose. That opportunity came on January 3, 2026, when U.S. military forces launched the operation to capture Maduro. The team assigned to clear and search the bunker was unlike any other element in the operation. It was led by a 25-year veteran of the DEA named Special Agent Miguel Ortega, who had spent his entire career working narcotics cases in Latin America. Ortega had been involved in operations against the Medellin cartel, the Cali cartel, and later the Mexican cartels. He understood how these organizations operated, how they moved product, how they laundered money, and he understood that securing the bunker wasn't just about seizing drugs, it was about collecting evidence that would be admissible in court. Accompanying Ortega were DEA forensic chemists, FBI evidence technicians, IRS criminal investigators specializing in money laundering, and Justice Department prosecutors who would ultimately try the case. They were protected by a security element composed of FBI hostage rescue team operators and Marine raiders who had been cross-trained in sensitive site exploitation. The team entered Miraflores Palace at 0430 hours after Delta Force had already secured the building and extracted Maduro. The palace was eerily quiet. Lights were on in some hallways, off in others. Papers were scattered across desks where staffers had fled in panic. In Maduro's personal office, a television was still on, tuned to a Venezuelan state news channel that was playing patriotic music and showing file footage of Hugo Chávez, apparently unsure of what else to broadcast. Granados had described the bunker entrance as being located in a storage room adjacent to the palace's main kitchen, concealed behind a false wall. The team found the room exactly where he said it would be. At first glance, it appeared to be exactly what it was supposed to be: a storage area filled with canned goods, bottled water, and cleaning supplies. But when an FBI technician used a portable ground-penetrating radar unit to scan the walls, the device detected a large void space behind the northern wall. The false wall was constructed from reinforced concrete designed to look like ordinary painted cinder blocks. It was cleverly done, almost impossible to detect visually. But the radar didn't lie. Behind that wall was empty space, and below that space, a stairwell leading down. The breach was methodical. Rather than simply blowing the wall apart, which could potentially damage evidence or trigger booby traps, the team used a combination of diamond-tipped cutting saws and hydraulic spreaders to create an opening. It took nearly 30 minutes, but when the section of wall was finally removed, the entrance to the bunker complex was revealed. Beyond the false wall was a steel security door with an electronic keypad lock. This was a serious piece of hardware, the kind of door you'd find protecting a bank vault or a military command center. The keypad required a 6-digit code. The team didn't have the code, but they didn't need it. An FBI technical operations specialist attached a bypass device to the lock's control panel, essentially hot wiring the mechanism. The lock clicked open. The stairwell descended approximately 40 feet below ground level. The walls were concrete, reinforced with steel rebar. The lighting was provided by LED strips along the ceiling, powered by an independent electrical system with battery backup. This wasn't a hasty construction. This was a professionally engineered facility that had cost millions of dollars to build. At the bottom of the stairs was another security door, this one even more formidable than the first. It was blast-resistant, designed to withstand not just forced entry but potentially military-grade explosives. The team used a shaped charge to defeat it, placing the explosive in a precise pattern that would direct the blast energy into the locking mechanism while minimizing collateral damage. The explosion was deafening in the confined space, even with hearing protection. When the smoke cleared, The door hung awkwardly on its hinges, the lock assembly completely destroyed. FBI operators pushed through, weapons raised, clearing the space beyond with tactical lights mounted on their rifles. What they found took their breath away. The bunker was vast, approximately 5,000 square feet, divided into multiple chambers. The main chamber was a storage area, and it was filled, floor to ceiling, with bricks of cocaine. Not bags, not bundles, bricks. Individually wrapped kilogram packages stacked on industrial metal shelving units that reached nearly to the ceiling. Each brick was wrapped in brown packing tape and stamped with a logo, a scorpion inside a circle. DEA agents recognized the marking immediately. It was the symbol of a Colombian trafficking organization known as Los Escorpiones, based in the Norte de Santander region near the Venezuelan border. Los Escorpiones were known to produce some of the highest purity cocaine in South America, typically testing at 92 to 95% pure. The team began the painstaking process of documenting and counting the cocaine. Each brick was photographed in place before being moved. Each stack was measured and inventoried. DEA forensic chemists took samples from random packages for field testing, confirming that the substance was indeed cocaine and beginning the process of determining its purity. The numbers were staggering. Initial estimates suggested there were approximately 15,000 kilograms of cocaine in the bunker, 15 metric tons. At wholesale prices in the United States, that quantity of cocaine had a street value exceeding $450 million. But the significance went far beyond the dollar amount. 15 tons of cocaine doesn't just appear. It represents months of production across multiple cocaine laboratories. It represents the cultivation of thousands of acres of coca plants. It represents a sophisticated logistics network capable of transporting multi-ton quantities of drugs across international borders. And most importantly, it represents the involvement of state-level actors with the resources and authority to move that much contraband without detection. In one corner of the main chamber, investigators found something even more disturbing: manufacturing equipment. There were industrial-grade scales capable of weighing packages up to 100 kilograms. There were vacuum sealing machines used to package cocaine for maritime transport. There were hydraulic presses used to compress cocaine powder into bricks. There were chemicals used to process and purify cocaine, including hydrochloric acid, acetone, and ether. This wasn't just a storage facility. It was an active processing and packaging operation located directly beneath the office of Venezuela's president. In an adjacent chamber, the team found records. Not digital records, which would have been easier to destroy, but physical ledgers, spiral-bound notebooks filled with handwritten entries documenting shipments, weights, destinations, and payments. The entries were coded, using initials instead of full names and abbreviations instead of locations, but the pattern was clear. One notebook, dated from July to December 2024, showed entries for over 200 individual shipments. Each entry included a date, a weight typically between 50 and 500 kilograms, a destination code, combinations like MXV or DR3, and a payment amount in US dollars. A DEA analyst who examined the notebook later estimated that the shipments documented in that single 6-month period represented over 40 tons of cocaine, with a total transaction value exceeding $800 million. But the notebooks weren't the most damning evidence. In a small office area within the bunker, investigators found a desktop computer that had been left running. The machine was password protected, but FBI cyber specialists were able to bypass the security and access the hard drive. What they found was a treasure trove of incriminating evidence. Email communications between Venezuelan military officers and Colombian cartel representatives, spreadsheets detailing cocaine shipments and profit distributions, scanned copies of bank transfer receipts showing payments from offshore accounts, and most significantly, video files. The videos appeared to be security camera footage from inside the bunker itself, showing Venezuelan officials and military officers overseeing cocaine processing and packaging operations. In one video, dated the 12th of November 2024, a man identified by DEA agents as Major General Cleaver Alcalá Cordons could be seen inspecting pallets of cocaine bricks while speaking on a cell phone. Alcalá had been under federal indictment in the United States since 2020 for narco-terrorism. In another video, dated the 3rd of December 2024, a civilian identified as Samark Lopez, a businessman known to be close to Diosdado Cabello, was shown meeting with several Colombian men in the bunker. They examined samples of cocaine, discussed logistics, and appeared to negotiate prices. The audio was clear enough that investigators could hear Lopez offering to facilitate maritime transport from Venezuelan ports to Central America. The implications were staggering. This wasn't a rogue operation conducted by corrupt military officers acting independently. This was an organized, systematic enterprise operating with the knowledge and approval of Venezuela's highest-ranking government officials. In a third chamber of the bunker, investigators made another significant discovery: weapons. Not just small arms, but military-grade hardware. There were crates of Kalashnikov rifles, RPG launchers, grenades, and plastic explosives. Some of the weapons still had Russian military markings, suggesting they had been diverted from official Venezuelan military stockpiles. Others appeared to be of Iranian manufacture, likely provided by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps as part of the military cooperation agreement between Venezuela and Iran. The presence of weapons in the bunker suggested that the facility was designed not just for drug storage, but potentially as a secure command post in the event of a coup attempt or foreign intervention. There were sleeping quarters, a small kitchen, bathroom facilities, and a communications room with radio equipment capable of encrypted transmissions. But it was the presence of the cocaine and the documentation of its movement that would form the basis for federal prosecutions. The evidence was overwhelming. The quantity alone was sufficient to trigger conspiracy charges that carried mandatory life sentences under federal law, and the documentation linked those drugs directly to Maduro and his inner circle. As the evidence collection continued, more teams of investigators arrived at the bunker. IRS criminal investigation agents began examining the financial records, tracing the flow of money through the network of shell companies and offshore accounts. FBI forensic accountants started building financial profiles of the key players, documenting their assets and attempting to identify proceeds that could be subject to forfeiture. By 0900 hours, the bunker had been fully secured and the initial evidence collection was complete. The cocaine had been inventoried and photographed. The records had been cataloged and prepared for transport. The computer equipment had been seized and secured in evidence bags, and the weapons had been rendered safe and documented. But the work was far from finished. The 15 tons of cocaine would need to be transported out of Venezuela and brought to the United States for destruction. The records would need to be translated, analyzed, and presented to grand juries. The computer hard drives would need to be forensically imaged and examined by specialists, and witnesses would need to be identified, interviewed, and potentially brought into protective custody. The significance of the bunker discovery extended far beyond the immediate criminal case against Maduro. It provided concrete evidence of something that U.S. intelligence agencies had long suspected but struggled to prove definitively: that Venezuela had become a narco state where the government itself, not just corrupt officials within it, was actively engaged in industrial-scale drug trafficking. This wasn't a matter of a few bad apples. This was systemic corruption at the highest levels. And the evidence found in that bunker would reshape how the international community viewed Venezuela and how the United States approached the problem of narco-states in Latin America. The discovery also vindicated years of work by DEA agents, FBI investigators, and intelligence analysts who had been piecing together the puzzle of Venezuela's role in the cocaine trade. For too long, critics had dismissed their work as politically motivated or exaggerated. Now, with 15 tons of cocaine sitting in a bunker beneath the presidential palace, there could be no doubt. By mid-morning, word of the discovery had reached Washington. At the White House, President Trump was briefed on the find during preparations for his scheduled press conference at Mar-a-Lago. According to officials present at the briefing, the president's reaction was one of vindication. He had been criticized by some for taking a hard line against Maduro, with critics suggesting that diplomatic engagement would be more effective. The bunker discovery proved that engagement had been futile. Maduro was a drug trafficker who happened to control a country, not a president who tolerated some drug trafficking. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who had been the most vocal advocate for military action against the Maduro regime, was similarly vindicated. Rubio had spent years warning that Venezuela posed a national security threat to the United States, not just because of its alliances with Cuba, Russia, and Iran, but because it was actively poisoning American communities with narcotics. The discovery of the bunker provided the evidence to support those warnings. At the DEA's headquarters in Arlington, Virginia, the mood was jubilant. Special agents who had spent years investigating the Cartel de los Soles, often working with limited resources and facing bureaucratic obstacles, finally had the smoking gun they needed. The bunker wasn't just evidence. It was vindication of their work and proof that their targeting had been accurate. But even as investigators celebrated, they recognized that the work ahead would be enormous. The evidence found in the bunker would generate hundreds of leads that would need to be pursued. Bank accounts would need to be traced. Shell companies would need to be penetrated. Co-conspirators would need to be identified and, where possible, arrested. Among the most important targets were the individuals whose names appeared repeatedly in the ledgers and computer files: Diosdado Cabello, Tarek El-Aissami, and Vladimir Padrino Lopez. All three were already under federal indictment in the United States, but the bunker evidence provided additional charges and, more importantly, additional leverage. Cabello, the regime's number 2 and head of the National Constituent Assembly, had long been suspected of being the operational leader of the Cartel de los Soles. The bunker evidence confirmed it. His name appeared dozens of times in the ledgers, always in connection with large shipments and substantial payments. DEA analysts estimated that Cabello had personally profited to the tune of over $2 billion from cocaine trafficking over the past decade. El-Aissami, a former vice president and interior minister, was even more dangerous. His connections to Hezbollah and Iranian intelligence made him not just a drug trafficker, but a potential national security threat. The bunker evidence showed that El-Aissami had used drug proceeds to finance weapons purchases and to fund Hezbollah operations in Latin America. He wasn't just enriching himself, he was using drug money to support terrorism. Padrino Lopez, the defense minister who had appeared on Venezuelan television calling for resistance to the American operation, was revealed to be deeply complicit. His signature appeared on military transport documents authorizing the movement of humanitarian supplies that, according to the ledgers, were actually cocaine shipments. He had used his position to turn the Venezuelan military into a logistics company for the cartel. But beyond these high-profile targets, the evidence implicated dozens of other Venezuelan officials: generals, admirals, governors, mayors, and bureaucrats. Some had directly participated in trafficking, others had taken bribes to look the other way. Still, others had provided logistical support, such as falsifying customs documents or providing intelligence on law enforcement operations. The scope of the corruption was breathtaking. It wasn't just a few officials. It was an entire system, a parallel government that existed alongside the official state apparatus but operated according to criminal rather than legal principles. As the day progressed, additional details about the bunker began to emerge. Engineers from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers who examined the facility estimated that its construction had cost between $15 and $20 million. The ventilation system alone, which was necessary to prevent the buildup of toxic fumes from the chemicals used in cocaine processing, represented a sophisticated piece of engineering. The bunker's electrical system was independent of the palace's main power grid, supplied by a dedicated generator located in a separate underground chamber. This meant the facility could continue operating even if power to the palace was cut. There were also backup communication systems, including satellite phones and encrypted radio equipment, suggesting that the bunker was designed to function as a command center in emergencies. The security was equally impressive. In addition to the blast-resistant doors, the bunker was equipped with a biometric access control system that required fingerprint scans for entry. The system's database, recovered from the computer equipment, contained the fingerprint records of 47 individuals who had been authorized to access the facility. DEA agents were in the process of matching those prints to known individuals, but preliminary analysis suggested they included senior military officers, government officials, and Colombian cartel representatives. Perhaps most telling was the presence of a sophisticated air filtration system designed to prevent detection by drug-sniffing dogs or chemical sensors. The system used activated carbon filters to scrub the air of cocaine particulates before venting it to the surface. This level of counter-detection engineering suggested that the bunker's operators were aware of the techniques used by law enforcement and had taken specific measures to defeat them. The discovery of the bunker also raised questions about how long it had been in operation. Based on the construction techniques and materials used, engineers estimated that the facility had been built sometime between 2008 and 2010 during Hugo Chávez's presidency. This suggested that the Cartel de los Sols predated Maduro's rise to power and that Maduro had inherited and then expanded a criminal enterprise established by his predecessor. This was significant because it reframed the narrative about Venezuela's descent into narco statehood. It wasn't just about Maduro, it was about the entire Chavista project, the socialist revolution that Chávez had launched in 1999. That revolution, which had promised to lift up the poor and challenge American imperialism, had instead created a kleptocratic narco state that enriched a small elite while impoverishing millions. The evidence also shed light on Venezuela's relationships with other hostile states. Iranian involvement was particularly concerning. Among the items found in the bunker were instruction manuals, in Farsi with Spanish translations, for operating various pieces of equipment. The presence of these manuals suggested that Iranian technical advisors had been directly involved in setting up the facility. This aligned with other intelligence suggesting that Iran had been using Venezuela as a base for intelligence operations and weapons smuggling in the Western Hemisphere. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps had established a significant presence in Venezuela, training regime security forces and providing technical assistance for various military and intelligence projects. The bunker appeared to be one such project. Cuban involvement was also evident. Among the records found in the bunker were communications with Cuban intelligence officers who appeared to be providing counterintelligence support, helping the regime identify and neutralize potential informants within the military and government. The Cubans weren't directly involved in the drug trafficking, but they were helping to protect the operation from detection and disruption. Russian and Chinese involvement was less clear, but there were indications. Some of the chemicals found in the bunker, used in cocaine processing, had been manufactured in China and imported through Venezuelan ports. Russian-made weapons found in the facility suggested that at least some Russian officials were aware that military equipment was being diverted to narco-trafficking operations. As the evidence collection entered its second day, the logistical challenges of removing 15 tons of cocaine from Venezuela became apparent. The drugs couldn't simply be destroyed in place. They needed to be preserved as evidence for trial. And they couldn't be left in Venezuela, where there was a risk they could be stolen or tampered with. The solution was to airlift the cocaine out of the country using military transport aircraft. C-17 Globemasters, the same aircraft that had brought in some of the assault forces, were used to fly the cocaine to the United States. Each kilogram was individually documented, photographed, and placed in evidence bags. The bags were then loaded into sealed containers, which were loaded onto the aircraft under armed guard. The flights took place over a 48-hour period, with the cocaine being transported to a secure DEA facility in Florida, where it would be stored pending trial. The operation required extraordinary security measures. Each aircraft was escorted by fighter jets. Each container was equipped with tamper-evident seals and GPS tracking devices. And each shipment was accompanied by a team of federal agents who maintained chain of custody documentation. The destruction of the cocaine, once trials were complete, would itself be a major operation. 15 tons of cocaine couldn't just be flushed down a drain or burned in an incinerator. It would need to be destroyed using specialized equipment at a secure facility, with environmental safeguards to prevent contamination. But before any of that could happen, the cocaine would serve as evidence in what promised to be one of the most significant narco-trafficking trials in American history. Federal prosecutors in the Southern District of New York, which had taken the lead on the case against Maduro, were already preparing indictments that would charge him and his associates with narco-terrorism, conspiracy to import cocaine, conspiracy to use weapons in furtherance of drug trafficking, and money laundering. The penalties for these crimes were severe. Narco-terrorism alone carried a mandatory minimum sentence of 20 years and a maximum of life in federal prison. When combined with the other charges, Maduro was facing the prospect of spending the rest of his life behind bars. But the legal case against Maduro was about more than just punishment. It was about accountability. For years, Maduro had acted with impunity, believing that his control of Venezuela's government made him untouchable. He had ordered the murders of political opponents, the torture of dissidents, the imprisonment of journalists. He had stolen billions of dollars from the Venezuelan people while they starved, and he had flooded American communities with poison. The bunker discovery ensured that he would face justice for those crimes. The evidence was overwhelming, the case was airtight, and there would be no negotiated settlement, no plea deal that would allow him to escape accountability. As news of the bunker discovery spread, reactions poured in from around the world. In Venezuela, the opposition celebrated. Maria Corina Machado, the leader of the democratic resistance, called the discovery the final proof of what we have been saying for years. The Maduro regime is a criminal organization masquerading as a government. In the United States, lawmakers from both parties praised the operation. Senator Marco Rubio, now serving as Secretary of State, had been vindicated in his long-standing warnings about the Maduro regime. Representative Maria Elvira Salazar called for the bunker evidence to be presented to the United Nations as proof of Venezuela's status as a narco-state. International reactions were more muted. The European Union issued a statement calling for Venezuela to cooperate with international investigators, but stopped short of endorsing the American military operation. The Organization of American States, long paralyzed by divisions over how to handle Venezuela, remained silent. But the silence of international organizations didn't matter. The evidence spoke for itself. 15 tons of cocaine in a bunker beneath the presidential palace, ledgers documenting hundreds of shipments, video footage of government officials overseeing drug processing operations. The case against the Maduro regime was now beyond dispute. For the investigators who had spent years pursuing the Cartel de los Soles, the bunker discovery was the culmination of their work. It validated their theories, confirmed their intelligence, and provided the evidence needed to dismantle one of the most dangerous narco-trafficking organizations in history. But even as they celebrated, they recognized that the work was far from over. The cartel's networks extended across Latin America and into the United States, Europe, and beyond. Dozens of co-conspirators remained at large. Billions of dollars in drug proceeds were still hidden in offshore accounts and real estate investments. The bunker was a beginning, not an end. It was the first domino in what would be a years-long effort to dismantle the infrastructure of the narco-state that Venezuela had become. But it was a critical beginning, and it sent an unmistakable message to narco-traffickers everywhere. There is no bunker deep enough, no palace secure enough to protect you from American justice.